welcome to this episode of Corner Gallery. I am your host, Romero Starks, and today I have with me photography extraordinaires Mark Applin-Fisher and Doug Gaubatz. How are you all doing today?
I'm doing very well so far.
Good. Thank you for joining us, gentlemen.
Thanks for having us.
So, just for starters, I'd love to know how you both got into photography.
I stole a camera as a child. No, I actually started out as a music teacher. And taught music at the elementary level for 14 years. And somewhere along the way, I said I need to do something else. And I had always been interested in photography. So I went ahead and came to a college close to me. It was Lindenwood College. And I got my master's degree here in black and white photography in 1982.
Okay. Now, how about you?
Well, for me, it was my father was number one because he was involved with photography. And I just picked it up from there, and then when I went to school, I wanted to stay with it, but only as an art, not on the commercial side of things.
Got you. So how would you all say that your backgrounds have played a part into your photography? Are there things you take pictures of that are linked in any way to your life, or do you just see things you're like, man, that would make a great picture, let me try to compose this?
I'll let you take that one, or at least start with that one.
Well, it kind of stems from the fact that I mentioned my father, and he was very much involved with just kind of documenting our everyday lives at home. And so when I went to school, I was introduced to the documentary style of photography, and so I just like looking at things and photographing what I like to look at, but it is kind of a document of the way things are and what we do with the landscape.
Mine goes along with that as well because I grew up in a small town, and I had started my program here at Lindenwood, but I didn't know exactly which way I was actually headed with it. I was still trying to figure out what I was trying to photograph. And a friend of mine one night said, just photograph what you know. And at that point, I realized that what I really knew was where I had grown up. So I went back and I went to my hometown for a month and photographed every day there and photographed the entire town. I photographed every building, every house, every church, every structure. I photographed as many of the people in the town as I possibly could. And that sort of began my documentary approach to photography. And it worked out well so far, I'm hoping.
So how long have you all been having your work in exhibits? When did that go from just something you enjoyed doing to, man, Mark, Doug, they're really good at this. We need to get their work featured.
In the 70s, in the 1970s, it started. And,
we have to clarify these things.
I know, it's, anyway. But yeah, it's, that's when.
After I got my master's here, I was still working for a school district, and I became the instructional media tech for the district, so I did these kinds of things. I produced television shows and stuff, and websites and things. So I sort of, after I got my master's, I went, well, I can't do anything with it other than get a job. So I had the job, and I didn't actually do any exhibit work for about 11 years after I got my master's degree. And then at that point, I was lucky enough to have gotten an offer to do an exhibit at the Sheldon Galleries here in St. Louis. And since then, I've been exhibiting rather consistently. But up to that time, I was just working for a living and pointing cameras at students at high school dances and things.
Gotcha. So what did that feel like to go from just something you enjoyed doing and maybe you shared with friends or family to seeing, wow, people want to see this stuff, and getting to see the looks on people's faces as they look at this in galleries and exhibits? How gratifying of a feeling is that?
It was a good feeling. I mean, being in school, we were always in touch with the current exhibits and what people were working on, and we would see what they were displaying, and then it was just sort of, you just fell into it and wanted to do that too.
That's the way it happened for me too. I got that exhibit at the Sheldon, and that was enormously successful. It just blew me away how much they liked the work. It was a series of things I did on Route 66, and it just really took off. And I really haven't been without an opportunity to exhibit since then. There are times when I've said I can't do it because it's expensive. You know, the show that we have here, there are 46 pieces in that show, not just of mine, but also of Doug's and 2 other guys that are in the show with us. And it takes a lot of time to just go shoot the work. It takes a lot of time to print the work. It takes even more money to mat it and frame it, and then to haul it, and then to haul it home and hope that you sell something along the way. And while I would love to be able to have made a ton of money doing this, that isn't really my driving force. It's just, I love seeing people's reaction to my work.
How do you decide as a photographer, these things I think I want to shoot in black and white, or these things would look good in color? How do you pick?
Well, it was something of a given
True.
in those days that if you wanted to do the photographic process by yourself, it had to be black and white, because you could easily get the film and the materials and do it. It wasn't until, what was it, somewhere in the 80s and 90s, where the color process became more accessible. And then suddenly we had a choice of switching from black and white to color. And of course now with digital, it's just a switch, a button, and you've got black and white. So it's not the same anymore.
Well, I went to school here at Lindenwood, and when I was here at Lindenwood, they didn't have a color system here. I had a home darkroom that I had for black and white, and they had a wonderful black and white darkroom here as well, but they just didn't have a color system. So at that time, my color exposure was actually, I did stained glass windows. I did those kinds of things for theory classes here, for color theory. And I didn't switch, and I also did black and white because, like Doug, I'm a documentary photographer. I enjoy, it's abstract, it's much more crisp and precise for me. Not for everybody. There are a ton of people that love color work, but I have always loved black and white, and that's actually what my master's degree was here, was in black and white film photography. So I have always been a film shooter. The other people that you'll speak of in this exhibit, they all started out as black and white shooters, and they all started out as film. I mean, we didn't start out with digital work until the past 10, 15 years, something like that.
Really?
And you had asked about the color in the black and white. A project that I'm working on right now, one of the photographs is here. I'm photographing in a lot of small towns in Missouri, and I wanted to specifically go back to my roots and do it in black and white. Well, I did that. But then there's a man, a friend of ours, who has said, yeah, Mark, but your color work is really strong. I don't want to hear that. I want to be able to do my black and white stuff. But that being said, the work that I have in this show here right now is all shot as black and white, but 2 of them I had converted to color. So you can't escape the clutches of color sometimes. But I will always be dragged back into black and white. And that's what this entire project will be if it ever really takes off and goes. So.
Well, one thing I do agree with you about as far as black and white is I love that how much sharpness you can get from a picture that's only, I mean, that's a small color scale, really, black and white, but you'd be surprised how many different shades come across and just how clean that picture looks in just those 2 colors or variations of those 2 colors.
It's beautiful.
It's a million shades of gray. And yeah, well, Doug and I both enjoy shooting black and white enormously. And a lot of the stuff that is in the show from his work, I think, is all film.
Yeah, well, yeah, most of it is.
Yeah. So the stuff I'm doing right now is digital, black and white digital work that I'm doing. Yeah.
So you spoke a little bit about film and digital. How has that been, seeing the evolution of cameras and photographies? At some point there's, you stick a roll of film, there's Polaroids. Now everything you can just click away and grab an SD card. How has that affected your process maybe, or how even then do you think that's changed photography in general?
It's been a blessing and a curse. The blessing part of this is that it's not only the absence of film, but it's the fact that I've been able to scan the film and make the film digital. So the beauty of that for me has been the fact that I never, I never thought I would ever produce as many photographs as I have been lately, because I can scan it and get it corrected in digital and get a print out of it. But to physically go into the darkroom and do that is so much work that I don't think I would have, it wouldn't have happened. Now, the other side of, I'm sorry, the other side of digital is the fact that where we've come into digital was the very beginning. And we've been the startup with all of this digital, I want to say stuff.
Junk, technology.
And it's absolutely wonderful always right now.
Oh, yeah.
See, but in a few years we'll look back on this and think, oh, how could we ever use that?
Yeah.
So it's such a transition, it's like unbelievable.
Well, after I retired from one of the jobs, I started teaching photography at one of the community colleges, and I was still teaching wet lab work, film photography. And so for a long time, I was sort of battling against that whole new technology that was in my face, whether I wanted it to be or not. So it's been a real challenge for me, but I finally have said, yep, they're right. Film has a certain richness and beauty to it that I still don't think you can quite achieve with digital, but almost everybody who ever sees me say that sentence will come after me after this, and they'll, you're wrong about that. So I mean, it takes all kinds to have a horse race, so, you know, that's just my preference.
Right. And you mentioned that that's a little bit of a difficult process, having to sit in the dark room and all of that. Can you all describe that a little bit for me? Because I obviously am a little younger. I didn't have to deal with as much of that. We had cameras. You just keep clicking the thing and take a picture and you turn it in and they'll print them out for you.
Well, that's one of the things I wanted to mention about Doug's work in this exhibit. We got notification of this exhibit about, what, 3 weeks ago, something like that? And so everything that's in there is sort of brand new, fresh art. And but when I saw Doug, he had brought in all these gorgeous prints that he had done. And I said, how many of these did you have scanned before you got this? And he said, 4. He brought in 25 pieces. He scanned all of them, printed them, matted them, framed them in under 3 weeks. You can't do that in a dark room. Well, you can, but you really have to be a heavy drinker. I mean, you really...
something like that.
Yeah, but you had asked about the darkroom process itself. I like it. It's a very zen thing. It's very calm and quiet, and it's like being in this room right now. It's a very peaceful setting. You put on a little music of whatever you'd like to have, and you have water burbling in the background with print washers and whatever. And so I like it. I like the process.
Then you can print mine.
Maybe collaborate a little bit.
That's right.
No. My wife and I moved about 6 years to a smaller house, and I said, I'm never going to need a darkroom again. And she said, okay. And then I got an idea to do some shooting out in Kansas that I needed to have a darkroom. So we built another darkroom, so there you go.
You just can't get away from it.
I keep trying. I've got my digital set up perfect, but the lab is still there too, just in case I need it. Yeah.
So what are some of the things that you don't like about it? Since you said you could give it over to him.
The
Thanks.
The issue with the darkroom is that when you go in with a piece of film to make one print, you start all of the setup and testing to get to that one print. And so if 2 weeks later you want another print from the same negative, you have to start that whole process again, no matter how many notes you might take. But with digital, you know, once the image is the way you want it on the computer, if things are reasonably stable in your life, you'll be able to print that image, and it will be exactly the same as the first one you printed, and it makes things a lot easier.
So one thing I noticed, both of you brought cameras, and obviously to most people they would look at these cameras and say, well, those are kind of older, because we're all used to these new big old digital cameras, and they've got all the bells and whistles. So tell me a little bit about your camera, Mark, and why it is that you like to use this camera.
This is a digital camera. And I like it because it has one lens, there's no zoom, there's no major bells and whistles, and I can set this for black and white, this was taken with this camera in black and white, but I do set this for black and white and can actually see black and white through the viewfinder, but it also records a color file. But these digital cameras are remarkable. I mean, truly remarkable. The things I do with this camera I could never do with a film camera. I just couldn't. For one thing, I could never record a color and a black and white file at the same time. And it's small, it's lightweight, it's called a rangefinder style, sort of. And I started out with a rangefinder camera. The very first camera I ever had was a $20 rangefinder that I still have, but it was a film camera. And I like the style, I like the shape, I like the feel, I like everything about it. It just has a nice feel to it.
It looks very cool. You came in here just so prepared. I thought you were ready to take some pictures right now.
That's why I bought this, because it's cool looking. Yeah.
Effective and sleek. I like it. So, Mark, you also had a camera with, or Doug, you also had a camera with you. You seem to have sat it
Same thing,
down.
different brand, but it's you could call it my everyday digital camera. But,
And that's a good point. This is just an everyday camera that you carry around no matter where you are and what you're doing, because you never know what something's going to happen. And you haven't seen the exhibit yet, but if you get to the exhibit out there, Don McKenna, one of the photographers, and I haven't had a chance to ask him about it, he's got a photograph of an Amish buggy in a little town in New York, and it's going down the street, and this Amish family is in it, and on the top of it is a canoe strapped to the top of this Amish buggy. How do you come across that?
Yeah.
You know, so you got to have a camera ready.
Right.
Yeah. So you never know. So you always carry your camera just in case you have an Amish guy with a canoe on his buggy. That's right.
In my experience with bumping into Amish people and even seeing them in their buggies, I don't think I've ever seen something like that.
Yeah, but
So
you're right. I've never seen a
document-worthy.
canoe. Yeah. So yeah.
So you all are always prepared, basically. You've always got your everyday
Well,
camera, because like you
most
say,
of
you
the
never
time.
know.
Yeah, there are those days that you don't, but you know, the rule of thumb is you really should carry a camera whether you do or not. Well, I wanted to make one more point about digital versus darkroom, and how you shoot. I think Doug shoots this way. I know I do. I still shoot as if I still had a 36 exposure roll of film in my camera. There are people who will literally, and I don't know why they do it, they should just buy a video camera. They'll just sort of keep the shutter button down and just sort of go gazing, 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 and then go, let's pick that one for
Right.
today. And that's just not my style. You know, I still think of it as I've got only 36 shots, I better make them last. So,
That's a smart
yeah,
approach. I
well,
find.
I don't know about that, but it works for me. Yeah.
No, I mean, I think it's understandable because, like you say, you do see people do that a lot, and even with smartphones now, people have that option. Oh, I'll just keep holding the button, and one of these has got to be one I like.
Yeah.
But I like that approach of, I'm going to make each of these count as if I only have a limited amount, instead of just having a whole clutter full of photos and having to sit through, that one's no good, okay,
Yep.
I like that one, having to play the eeny, meeny, miny, mo game.
Yeah, it just doesn't make any sense to me.
well, it's very difficult to teach editing these days.
Yeah.
I would know.
There are thousands of photographs that people are taking, and they want to keep all of them,
Yeah.
which they should, but the editing is the key.
Yeah. It's
So-
a challenge.
You mentioned you shot this one here on that camera. Tell us about this particular picture, and where was this? What gave you the idea to take this picture?
As I said, I'm working on a project in small towns in Missouri, and there are 114 counties in the state, and I've visited 60 of them. And in those 60 counties, I have photographed over 400 towns. This is in Lebanon, Missouri, and I pulled up, a friend of mine was with me, and I pulled up, we were out photographing, and it's a bowling alley that is closed. And I wanted to shoot the facade. And just as I was getting ready to shoot this wonderfully weathered facade of this bowling alley, a van pulled up in front of the bowling alley. Damn it, move. And then I realized, okay, that adds to it. And then they got out and started going to the bowling alley. It's a closed bowling alley. It turns out they own the place.
Oh, okay.
So they saw us with cameras, and I said, you know, would you mind if I take a photograph of the sign? And she said, no. She said, would you like to take a photograph inside? You betcha.
Yeah.
So we went in, and it's a church that owns the bowling alley now, and they use it for private events and for fundraisers and that kind of thing. And they were preparing for one of those, I think. And they said, you know, we got about 15 minutes before you can you got to go away. So I scrambled around like a crazed weasel taking photographs inside that place. And that's one of the wonderful advantages to a digital camera as well. I didn't have a flash. This is a non-flash photo. And I really didn't have to fiddle around too much with exposures or anything. It just, these things work great in low light. And this was a low light situation. And so these are ideal for things like that. So that's how I got this shot, and that's how you get a lot of the shots. If you go to these small towns, people want to talk. They want to sort of share their life. They want to be recognized as being a part of the planet, because a lot of them are being given very short shrift now. These poor people, they have nothing and they're getting less. Right. And so they are happy to have anybody take an interest in their lives. And so you're invited into a lot of places that you otherwise might not have a chance to go visit. So not always. Sometimes there are pit bulls and angry farmers, but for the most part, they'll treat you nicely if you treat them well.
So Doug, I'm assuming here that this one belongs to you.
Actually does.
It's safe to
just double checking. I don't.
That's okay.
Don't want to discredit you.
No.
So tell me about this one.
So when I was driving to St. Charles, because I'm on the other side, I started thinking of photographs I had taken in St. Charles. And so then when the show came up, I thought, well, let's just use St. Charles photographs. And this is one that came to mind first. And it's in a spot where the old St. Charles Bridge came into St. Charles at Adams and 2nd Street. And for some reason, when I first saw that spot, that intersection, it just hit me as how unique it was. Where the bridge landed, there was this big, nice house on one corner, there was this gas station on the other, and there was a bus station on the other. And it just kind of amazes me that there was one time where all the traffic going west out of St. Louis had to pass on one lane coming into St. Charles. It seems so unbelievable now. But anyway, that bridge was fascinating to me because it had a walkway. I mean, you could walk across that bridge, but I always wondered why you would want to walk across that bridge. Because if you were on the other side, where were you?
Yeah, out in the middle of nothing.
You were, it was miles
there
to
was
get
a sand plant
to
and nothing
St.
else.
Louis.
Yeah.
So anyway, but it was fascinating how they did the bridge, the railing. You could go down to Main Street, and but it's all gone. So I did a few photographs of the intersection. Or I should say, I brought out a few photographs of that intersection and then rephotographed the intersection, and that's in the show as a panoramic.
And that's another part of it. You're recording things that obviously no longer are there, and most people don't even care that they're no longer there. They're really happy to have wider streets and better infrastructure and whatever, which is a debatable thing whether we have better infrastructure. But there's just so much character in his photography of that time period. This was taken when, 1970?
Yes.
Didn't want to give away a time
No,
stamp?
he's 23 now. He's only 23.
It's hard to remember all the exact dates. Anyway.
Yeah, we've been doing this a while.
I see. So obviously you both mentioned that you teach. What type of feeling does that bring you to see how you can help motivate and encourage these younger people to start getting their photography together, their composition, and understanding better shot selection? How does that make you feel to know I'm kind of helping this new generation of people become better photographers?
Well, like I said, the editing is the key. But I tried to get across the part of it where you're taking photographs that have some meaning for you, something personal. Finding the photographs that you feel something close to, which means, looking into your past or your family photographs to see which photographs have meaning, and as to why they have meaning. The disappointing thing for me these days is that there's just so many photographs, and we see them in so many ways, and we can take so many now that it's so easy to just see them but not really pay too much attention to them, and that's kind of a disappointment. So it's hard to sort of pull that back in and say, let's pick the best ones, or pick the ones that are the most meaningful. So,
the fear that I have is that one misstep, one exploded 4 terabyte drive, and everything is just a gazillion pixels out in the middle of nothing. And so Susan Sontag wrote a book called On Photography that I would recommend people read, talking about snapshots and other things. But one of the things was, Aunt Minnie had a box of photographs in her drawer when she died of all of your relatives going back to the 1920s or the 1880s or whatever it was. You don't really have that physical document anymore. You've got just the electronic component of it. And that's what I tried to tell the students, is that they need to print them, they need to make certain that they are a permanent thing, that they can, if the digital file goes sideways, you still have a physical document that you can take and say, this was Aunt Minnie, when she lived in Des Moines or whatever. So that's a real hard thing to teach, is because we are such a fast-paced society now. We have so many things going on in our lives. Everybody has a cell phone. You don't even attempt to try to save everything that you've taken on a cell phone. It just is, here's what happened at the party, and then you delete it and you go on to the next party. So that's a real hard thing to get young people to grasp, is that there is no permanence to what they're doing. So we try to convince them that maybe there needs to be a little bit more permanence in their art.
Gotcha. Well, gentlemen, I greatly appreciate your time today. Thanks for stopping by and sharing with me. And I look forward to getting to stop by the gallery and see more of your work, as well as the work from the other artists.
We certainly hope that you do. And we invite everybody to do that.
Yes, please. That is all for today's episode of Corner Gallery. As you just heard, feel free to stop by and check out the exhibit. For the next couple of weeks, everything will be there, and it is a massive exhibit with plenty of beautiful photography. And we appreciate you, Mark and Doug, for coming.
Thank you for
once
having
again.
us.
And thank you to John, our producer, for helping us coordinate this. We'll see you next time.